All right, hello, my name is Mitch Kissick. Today's date is March 14th, 2017. Today I'm interviewing James Wells, president of Ball State Student Government Association on Ball State's campus, as part of the Ball State University African American Alumni Oral History Project Part 2. James, can you start off kind of just by telling me a little bit about your childhood, like where you're from, and some things that maybe led to you coming to Ball State?
Yeah. Well, I was born in Munster, Indiana, and raised in Gary, Indiana. It was about, let's say, well, of course, it was June 16th, 1994. My mom and grandmother decided to go all the way to Munster instead of the Gary Hospital at that time because the city was in a decline and lost many of its resources. And so that was the type of environment that I was raised in as far as the city is concerned. But I had a very interesting childhood. My mom usually worked a lot. She was going to school for nursing and ended up working at the St. Anthony's Hospital in Michigan City, which led to me being raised a lot by my grandmother, who never let me or any of my siblings have any free time. We had to be up to something. She always has a saying that an idle mind is the devil's playground. So that says a lot about how my childhood went. But from there, I learned a lot from my grandparents. I ended up going to a performing arts school when I went to the sixth grade. It was one of the best schools in the city, and my mom wanted me to make sure that I was going to go to a good environment. And from there, my whole take on the world just expanded, and it led to many of the things that I do nowadays and how active I am in my own life. And from going to Emerson, learning how to play the cello, doing musical theater, technical theater, student government, I dropped all of that and just stuck with politics. And so transitioning into college, I was looking for a school that could give me the tools to learn about urban planning and communication and political science. Luckily enough, one of my friends who graduated 2 years before me went to Ball State, and I happened to ask him how was Ball State, and he said it was a nice middle road school, not too big, not too small. And he said anything that I wanted to do, I could do. And so Ball State, the more I looked into it, I saw that they had one of the best, and well, the only urban planning program in the state, and one of the best communication programs by far. So it just felt natural to go to Ball State, and it was actually the only school that I applied for. I got lucky on that one, but that's how I ended up here at Ball State.
Awesome. Now you said you're from Gary, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what was life like growing up in Gary?
For me and my family, it was very much sheltered.
Mm-hmm.
Harley could do a lot there. There wasn't much to do in the city, but my family, they didn't want me to go down a path that would be negative or unfortunate. With my grandmother, you were expected to go to church every Sunday. That was a lot, even if you didn't want to. I was about 18 and still senior in high school, and my grandmother still forced me to go to church. In school, to find stuff to do, because I've always been a busybody, I cannot sit still. I found an outlet in student government and being involved with the community and finding out what was going on. I would attend school board meetings. Outside of that, I would be in rehearsal, whether it been trying to train and learn all I could about the cello or getting ready for a play in theater. In elementary school, I would say most of my time was probably occupied by homework. I went to an honors school, and the homework was ridiculous. It was, you go to school, you go home, do homework until about 9 o'clock, and go to bed. It was a lot of work. So my experience was quite different from most of everybody else who I grew up with.
And then you also mentioned that like you attended Emerson School for the Visual and Performing Arts.
Mm-hmm.
So was that school one of a kind, would you say?
I would say so. It's interesting. Its history is that when it first opened up, it was actually the first performing arts school in the state of Indiana. I only found that out until probably my junior or senior year of high school. What made it unique was that it was a neighborhood school that had to close a few years prior, and many people in the houses and homes around the school didn't want the school to be shut down. So they all got together and they put their resources together and reopened it up as a performing arts school. It's a public school. The only way you can get into it is by auditioning. So it was open to the entire community to come and be part of this school. What made it unique was that not only did you have to have a talent, but they also valued having strong academics. So it was a school for students who were smart and who were talented. And many people thought it was just for people who wanted to dance and sing and act and play an instrument, which wasn't the case. We had to prepare to take the I step just like everybody else did. What also made it unique was that it was a family atmosphere. Everybody knew everybody. We had collaborations amongst the majors. Teachers knew what was going on in the children's lives. They were friends with the parents. The parents knew what was going on. They were involved with the school. And it just all added up to having this family atmosphere. On top of that, I would say we were one of the top schools in the state as far as performing arts. And that set us apart from the rest of the city.
Wow. From that experience at Emerson, you also mentioned that you were a part of the Student Government Association at Emerson.
Mm-hmm.
At what time in your life did you know that you wanted to pursue government or politics? Because you're currently the student government president at Ball State, so clearly that's definitely been an important part of your life.
Yeah, it started the year before I went to Emerson. It was, I think, the 5th grade. I came across a story in one of our textbooks in our reading class, and it talked about kids in their communities doing different things to give back, whether it been opening up a bike shop to fix old bikes and provide that to neighborhood kids, or feeding the poor or hungry. And that kind of inspired me. So when I got to Emerson, walking into the building, it was about 100 years old anyway. Going into the auditorium, I clearly remembered, I looked to my right and you could see the mold like 2 inches thick on the walls, and you looked to the left, the same thing. And so there was this kind of kick in me that said something had to be done. Being raised by my grandmother, I was always taught to fix what was ever wrong and never sit idly by. And so I decided to write a letter to the mayor one day, and I said, hey, this is going on, what can be done about it? And of course they send those general formal letters about thank you for writing me and keep up the good work and whatnot. So I wasn't satisfied then. It took me 2 years before I obtained my first office, which was class president, and I held on to that for 4 years and eventually became the student council president and the citywide student council president, and it became a natural fit to go into politics here at Ball State.
Awesome.
My name is Marquise G, and we're back with James Wells. So you left off with Mitch talking a little bit about your educational background at Emerson. Now, I was taking a look at some of your educational history, and you have a lot of different strings tying together. You went from visual and performing arts to a political science and communications major and a residential property management minor. Kind of give me a little bit of a story on how all three of those come together.
Yep. Well, so like any college student, when you first get to college, it's trying to figure out what to do. In my case, I ended up changing my major about 9 different times, in between urban planning, political science, and communication. What set me off was that by late July, I got a letter from the urban planning department that said I was accepted. And this was way after I had my schedule put together, so it threw me all off as far as my plans of what to do. From there, I tried to register as soon as possible for a couple of the intro classes. And from taking those classes, I really loved urban planning. And I said, this is something I have to do, but I knew I didn't want to do any of those designing classes. I lost my ability to draw 10 years ago, so if you try to look at it, you wouldn't be able to tell what I was trying to draw. So I was changing my major between those 9 different times, and it got to a point where I asked my advisor, what can I do to get out of here in 4 years, but do what I want to do? And she connected me with the dean of the Honors College at that time, which was Dr. James Renewal. And he told me about this program they had called Integrated Studies. Basically, it was kind of create your own major. And so from there, he instructed me to figure out what it was that I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn what was urban planning. I wanted to learn about policy formulation, how to develop consensus among different groups, how to effectively communicate those ideals to persuade people to follow a goal and set it for a community. From there, I then listed what I wanted to do in life. I know that I wanted to go back to my hometown eventually and help revitalize the area. I also wanted to be able to have the skills to move up the political ladder too. And from there, I had to go about 6 months meeting with different departments, different chairs, professors, and go through the entire Ball State course catalog and figure out the exact courses that would be needed to take and kind of build this major. So after the 6 months, I was finally able to put this major together, and then I had to name it. And what stuck in mind was that it had an urban mindset, putting cities together, building cities, bringing people together, but also looking at the broader goal in mind of the community instead of just looking at one aspect of it. So statesman came into play and came the second part of the name, and I put it all together and created urban statesmanship.
Great, fantastic. So it seems that you have a political mindset and this urban renewal mindset. What is the crossroad for those two, and what does that look like at the end for you, your ultimate goal?
The crossroads for those two, I would say, is that as I look at the course of history and over time, I saw that a lot of people lived in the cities. That's where all the power was at. And after we had malls being built, people left the cities and moved into the suburbs. But now people are moving back to the cities, and it's expected that over half of the world's population is going to live in cities. So where there are more people gathered, there's going to be more power, more voices, more influence at play. So for me, that's where the two collide. That is where the sense of change is going to happen. As I also did research too, I saw that with the different ways the government is funding and providing funding for different initiatives over time, they are beginning to give up a lot of more power back to the states and cities, and they are leaving towns by themselves to fend for themselves, and it's causing a lot of problems. But it's also a great opportunity for cities to be innovative and be these catalysts for change. So that's where I see politics and this urban planning mindset coming together.
Okay. I want to pause on that thought, and I want to go to something that's a very integral part of your life, which is the Student Government Association here at Ball State, which is a very integral part of having a voice for Ball State students. Tell me a little bit about your journey to where you are now as president of SGA.
Yep. looking back at my freshman year, it all started back when I became a senator, representing the Studebaker West Residence Hall. And from there, that started off with me being as active as I could. Of course, knowing that I can't sit still for long, I had to be proactive and be outgoing and let the rest of my colleagues know where I stood on issues. Most of the time, because I saw that nobody spoke up in Senate, which was quite surprising. I eventually became a chair of a committee, which was a great opportunity to get out there more with the organization. I became chair of the Academic Affairs Committee and pushed to, one of my first projects, I pushed to stop the university from expanding its online textbooks to being required for students, because there was this transition between our generation is part of, we're used to textbooks, physical textbooks, and we have the next generation that's coming up that's more than likely maybe used to tablets. For us, it didn't make sense to just require off the back. So we kind of made that, the university slow down a bit on that. I held on to that chairmanship going into my sophomore year. And I eventually was able to attain enough experience and to understand the whole entire political structure at Ball State to where the incoming president that year, Jack Hesser, and his slate, Atlas, came into office and they asked me to serve as the Secretary for University Governance. So my junior year was consisted of being part of the cabinet in the executive branch. And that provided a fantastic opportunity to get involved with the entire structure here at Ball State and to meet with administrators, faculty members, and understand the dynamics between students, faculty, and the administration. My spring semester of my junior year, I was still the secretary of university governance, but I also obtained an internship at the State House. It was also the semester that I ran for president with my Slate Summit, and it was probably the toughest point in my life because I probably took a different path where I was an hour away from campus doing campaigning, which meant that I had to rush back right after I got off for work working at the State House, and then I would campaign, hit the ground running. It would be nothing but campaign stops for 2 weeks, a meeting with the slate and the staff at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, and then trying to review and get homework done with my online classes, review what's the legislation that's coming up at the State House, then drive all the way back down to Indy. I probably didn't go to bed until 2 o'clock, had to wake up at 6 o'clock to make sure I beat the rush hour traffic in Indy. So my body was exhausted and went to new levels that I never thought it would. And from there, the only thing I could think of during those 2 weeks was, did I give it my all? And the other thing was that, did I do all that I could for my own team? I did not want my slate mates to feel disappointed at the end. But luckily for us, it all paid off.
So with those two questions, did I give it my all? Did I do all I could for my slate mates? How do you feel that you did justifying those answers?
I think I did great. We won. So, but other than that, the point on that was that, did I give them my all by making sure that I was supportive enough for them, that I was encouraging enough for them, that I didn't lose my cool, that I was the leader that they needed me to be for them. And as I reflect back on it, they have never been afraid to give me their opinions and let me know when I'm wrong, but they have always remained encouraged to continue this path that we've been on. So as I look back, I can say that not only did I give it my all, the whole entire team gave it their all.
Thank you. Okay.
Ready to go whenever you are. Right.
Rolling.
Hey guys, I'm back again with James. My name's Nick Evans. So James, you were talking about your campaign for president as part of your group summit, correct? Can you briefly describe your platform, like what your goals were for your term as president, and just briefly give an idea of like what you hope to accomplish?
Yep. When the slate was coming together, we were looking at what it was that we wanted to run on and what we wanted to be about. We came up with over 25 platform points, a nice chunk of that coming from carrying over some of the platform points from Atlas to ensure that student government had this stability and sense of consistency with itself. What we wanted to do was be bold and unafraid to take on tough issues and actually do some of the things that our student body was talking about. We would say we were a slate that campaigned probably the first time in a while on social issues, on the environment, on diversity, multicultural issues, on mental illness, which was a great step in a different path than previous slates. It usually was fun, fluffy stuff, fun projects that could be easily accomplished. And from us taking on such a big chunk of ideals, we came up with the name Summit because we had in mind was that we wanted to take the student body in our campus to newer heights. And I constantly reminded everyone too that climbing up a mountain isn't an easy task, but having a team working together can uplift each other and carry this hope for the future. And so we wanted to do all that we can, and surprisingly, we are almost about done with accomplishing all of our platform points.
Wow, that's impressive.
It also, it's funny too that we had the biggest amount of platform points ever in student government history, as well as almost getting them done, that we were noticed by the Board of Trustees and became the first exec board ever in Ball State's history to be invited by the board to present to them.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you mentioned the diversity as one of your platforms. What did you feel like Ball State needed to do to increase its diversity amongst the student body and faculty as well, if that was one of your issues as well?
Yep. What I saw with diversity is what I saw in society with the Black Lives Matter movement, with issues of immigration. I saw that this was going to become, these topics were not going to go away anytime soon. And we had in mind was that we need to address it and be prepared instead of waiting to be reactive. What we had in mind was that we need to provide an open outlet for many groups on campus to come together and share their concerns. What we had in mind was to create a diversity commission where we could bring groups outside of the Big Four and include many of our international and smaller organizations, our political ideology groups, our religious groups, and really live up to the ideal of what diversity is. And from there, we have consistently attended groups, mostly in the international area, especially due to the nature of the times. We have been doing all that we can to make sure that the administration is aware and to make sure that Ball State stays proactive in its attainment to create a welcoming environment here on campus. And what we have seen is that our administration is becoming more reactive and it's changing its messaging to be more responsive and sensitive to the needs of the students, as well as showcasing Ball State, excuse me, and showcasing Ball State in a light where it should be a top model school for the state and the nation.
Cool. So to kind of come back again with the diversity thing, have you or a friend of yours ever faced racial discrimination during your time as a student here on Ball State or in the Muncie area?
I haven't, but I know I'll take that back. I wouldn't say that I have faced discrimination, but I have faced a kind of ignorance that is prevalent amongst my peers and my generation. And that's not to say that it's any fault of anybody. It's based off of our different experiences growing up and coming to college where you have many people from many different walks of life converging on one area. I've been put in the position where, even in my own fraternity, where I've had people say things such as, take the government for instance, of why the government needs to spend so much money in developing or providing funding for public schools or helping black schools out. And it comes from a different experience where they have never been put in a position to grow up in schools that have been shut down, where the funding formula has changed, where your community is, in a sense, it feels like it's being attacked and destroyed constantly, on top of stereotypes from society being placed on that. I have had friends who have gone off in job interviews where they probably don't get the job because of their name.
Oh, wow.
I have been fortunate where my name is a general name, much different from many people in my own community, where I do get accepted into that to that interview. And I'm constantly trying to reflect and think that whether or not, as far as I've advanced in life, if it's based off of because I'm black or if it's based off of my merits. And honestly, I still don't know. It's probably going to take 40 years down the road where I can review and reflect on my whole entire life to really look at it, to see whether or not I get as far in life because of affirmative action, or because a company or a group was trying to meet its quota of diversity, or whether it's not because somebody actually looked at the character and not my skin.
How do you hope to change that ignorance, that persona that you have described once you graduate Ball State and once you enter into the public sphere? How do you hope to change that and improve things?
Continue to do what I'm doing. Continue to be unafraid of being out there in the community. Right now, I just finished a book called The 50th Law, and it talks about 50 Cent's life growing up, and it's kind of a play on the continuation of Robert Greene's book, The 48 Laws of Power. What this 50th law is about having fear of nothing. And I've kind of tried to take that in my own life and be unafraid of anything in life. I know that I might be faced with racism, I might be faced with discrimination or bigotry or conflict and whatnot, but I can't let that stop me from doing or going to where I want to be in life. And so I would say, as I go further in life, it's a saying in the black community that when you have an opportunity, you need to show up and show out. I don't know how much progress has been made where you can feel a sense of equality, but I know that I still have a role and a part to play for the people who are coming after me and for the next generation, to continue to make sure that I show up and show out, and to make as much progress as I can, to go through any struggle that I possibly have to endure, so that I can make sure that they can have a better chance and they can have a sense of moving further much faster than I did.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer those questions.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
All right, this is Allison Hunt, and we're back with James Wells. I kind of wanted to go back to the social issues that Nick was talking about earlier. Ball State has historically been kind of a moderate and conservative campus when it comes to social justice. Do you think that's still the case?
No, I think we've been a very progressive university. Many people don't like to give our board of trustees much slack, but from my time getting to know them, they really care about the student body. And what showed me that it's progressive was that 2 years ago, when the state of Indiana's General Assembly was trying to pass HRJ 3, then they changed it to 6 to ban same-sex marriage and the state's constitution. To see the response from Ball State was inspiring, and to see the stance against that amendment taken by our Board of Trustees was revealing to see that they were attuned to the needs and the wants of the student body and the community as a whole. And I know that they try to be careful. I know that our campus tries to be cautious, but I know deep down that they want to move forward and see this campus be as advanced as possible as it can.
Okay. There was a Daily News photograph of you at a rally to make Ball State be a sanctuary campus. Do you show up often for those sort of events?
No, I do not. I try to make sure that while I've been president, that student government be the base of where everybody can feel like they're welcome and that all ideals can come to the table. And so I try not to show up and show my presence. I try to let the political winds take whatever course they're going to do and be as responsive as much as possible. But for this, that case, it became personal for me. My communications director, the weekend before, had reached out to me, and she was wondering what was Ball State's stance going to be, or what was the university going to do to take care and protect its undocumented students. And what grabbed me was that as we were texting back and forth, I was on the way to the movie, so I couldn't do as much as I wanted to. She said that it's going to impact me, and she didn't need to say anything more. I already knew what she meant by that. And so the next day, I called a emergency cabinet meeting, and that night, the whole cabinet, we came together to assess the situation and figure out what was going to be our steps as far as the student government, what was the pros and cons. And we left that meeting with the mindset was that our focus was not on Ball State trying to take a stance, but trying to do all that we can to make sure that the students were taken care of. To meet with as many administrators as much as possible, to get student orgs together, to monitor the legislation that's going through the process at the State House and at Congress. It was a sense of, these are my friends who are being affected by this. And for my vice president, who's a Latina, she's a first generation American citizen in her family. We two together, we were, I would say, the first students of color to be elected at the top of the ticket for president and vice president. And I know how much this affects her and the historical period in time this means for student government. So for this was a time where I had to step outside of my role of traditional being president and being politically correct, or whatever you want to call it, and do what is right and what I felt was right.
Right. Okay. Another minority that's been in SGA legislation recently is transgender students. Mm-hmm. Do you think that Ball State is trans inclusive enough?
I would say we're making roads there. Hopefully 2 years ago, when we put in our legislation to get the university to build more gender neutral restrooms, we had a few already on campus, and it had plans to be added to the master plan. From there, and it's all been student driven too. We have plans to get our university to provide gender neutral housing, and we have had positive responses from Housing and Res Life, from student organizations, and so we're hopeful that the university and its next plans, as far as increasing housing and working with Housing and Residence Life, that they are going to eventually include gender neutral housing. So the Ball State is on its way there, and we are glad that it's responsive to what we want as students. I know that from the LGBT community, they would like more to be done, and what I would hope is that sometime soon Ball State would have a LGBT resource center on campus.
Okay. Do you have any legislation that you think is the most important that's happened under your presidency?
Last semester, it was the Sexual Assault Summit resolution. We wanted to bring all of the schools in Indiana together to address sexual assault. And being in contact with the other student body presidents at the other schools, for the first time we've come together, we got a sense of this is something we all want to do, and we've all wanted to get in contact with each other for the longest, and we've been fortunate enough to be at this moment in time in history to come together. I wanted to make sure that we had key groups on campus behind this legislation before we sent it out to other schools. And the one group I wanted on campus to back this resolution was Greek life. I went and visited the Interfraternity Council at their delegate meeting, and I heard when I got up there and presented, there was no questions, no response whatsoever, so I got nervous. But after they did the vote, it came out to be a unanimous vote to support the legislation. And after the meeting, many chapter presidents and their representatives came up to me saying, "Hey, can we get a copy of this? We want to present it to our chapters. Can you come in and speak about it?" That to me was one of the proudest moments in my life, especially as a Greek man, to see that fraternity men were taking a stance too against this. And I know how deeply they are affected by it and the image and the image that comes along with it. A couple of weeks back in January, when we got back from winter break, IUPUI said they will be glad to host it. A couple of schools got together, and what I was most proud was that Ball State is in a fantastic situation to be in to lead this as far as our programming and educational resources and the willingness by our own leadership within student government, the administration, and Greek life itself to do something about this. We left that meeting knowing that we have a lot more to do as far as educating society on what sexual assault is and what rape is and what harassment is. And we gave other schools the tools that Ball State is doing. Now they are inspired to hold their own leaders accountable to do something about it. Hopefully next year, after I've gone out of office, the schools will continue to do so. And their next goal is to provide preventative measures to finally reduce the numbers of sexual assault.
Awesome. Okay, one other thing that happened just after you were elected, I believe, was that the president, Paul Ferguson, was unexpectedly resigned. How did that affect your tenure as president?
So that meant that depending on how long the search was going to be, starting off, we were not going to have a university president in place. We were going to have an interim university president. And it's unrelated that I was selected to be the student representative on the search committee. And it had nothing to do with being student body president. So as the year has gone on, I have been in the unique situation where we don't have a university president, but I'm also helping to select the next university president. And I would say that has been one of the biggest driving force behind how Summit has acted and served, because it caused such an uproar on campus from the student body and the faculty of why President Ferguson left and the way the process led. For us, it kind of kicked us in the butt as far as student government, because any concerns that the student body had gets thrown to student government. And so I wanted to be proactive. I saw the article after the first public meeting that was announced by the Board of Trustees had occurred after that event. And one of the things that interim President King had said at the time was talk to your student government representative. So instead of waiting for this student to reach out to me, I looked him up on Facebook and said, hey, you want to grab lunch and talk about this? And from there, it changed the whole dynamic. We were going to be proactive as much as possible. For the first time, student government held town hall meetings. We put together a rebranding of student government. We came up with a social media team. We changed our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, our way we communicate with the students. And so from President Paul Ferguson leaving, student government had a breath of fresh air of where we wanted to be proactive and make sure students felt that they had a student government that was listening to them and was serving them to the best of their ability.
Wow. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, this is Lauren Hendricks, and I'm back with James Wells. You were talking with Allison just a minute ago about how your proudest piece of legislation had to deal with Greek life, and I know we've talked a lot about your academics and the extracurriculars that have helped you in your professional life, but I kind of want to focus more on your social life here at Ball State, because I know it's also a big part of the college experience. Yeah. So you were part of a fraternity here on campus, correct?
Yes.
Which fraternity are you a part of, and when did you join it?
The fraternity I joined, my freshman year was Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity, and right as soon as I got to college, I ended up in a fraternity. Was not expecting it, was not planning on it, but it happened.
Why did you initially want to join Greek life?
I initially wanted to join Greek life. I actually wanted to join a historically black fraternity. I wanted to join the fraternity that Dr. King was a part of, which was Alpha Phi Alpha. Unfortunately, I didn't see any of them around. I think they only had one member at the time. So coincidentally, my mind wasn't as focused on Greek life since it was the beginning of the year and a lot is going on and you're trying to take it in all from hall council meetings to student government to trying to figure out your classes and look both ways before you get hit by a shuttle bus. And so I was approached one day by who happened to be my orientation leader, Austin Kraft. He reached out to me at the beginning of the year and said, you want to grab lunch? I said, sure. I knew he was in student government, so I was gunning to pick his brain about student government. But from our conversation, he asked me, you're interested about Greek life? And I told him that I wanted to, join a black fraternity and whatnot. And so he said, why don't you check out my fraternity? And he said, come out to a cookout. And so I was puzzled that he invited me to a cookout and to eat, and that was it. I thought it was going to be like a party, the stereotypical things that I saw from Animal House. It was far from that. I got to one of the brothers' houses, and they were playing dodgeball, volleyball in the backyard. Someone was cooking burgers, and everybody was friendly. It was weird to me. I was like, I had no idea who these people are, but I guess it goes back to that Hoosier hospitality. And I ran into the guys again at another volleyball game, right between Neuer and Stu West. And as I was applying to student government, I ran into Lambda Chi's again. And I just stopped and said, why in the world are y'all all over the place? And they said, we have no idea, but we're just involved. And so I saw that they were involved, they were leaders around campus. They were people who were active and engaging and all around nice guys. So I decided to join Lambda Chi. And from that, I had so many life lessons from that fraternity, good, bad, ugly, life fulfilling, that to this day, I don't regret.
Off the top of your head, do you know what the values of your fraternity are?
Yep, 7 core values. Spell out the acronym of leadership. We have loyalty, duty, respect, service and stewardship, honor, integrity, and personal courage.
And which one of these values would you say is most important to you? Or
personal courage.
Personal courage. Can you explain why that's most important to you?
For me, it's about having the courage not only to uphold the values, but also having that courage in life to live to the convictions of your values. And oftentimes I find myself that I may get stuck in a position where my integrity is in challenge and I see something wrong, and like everybody else, I may be peer pressure, but I have to remember the values that I chose to live by and have the courage to live out the teachings of what my fraternity is about. Even when at times it may not be the popular decision to do, I still need to do what's right.
Right, and I feel like that value of personal courage is kind of why you've gotten involved a lot in your other organizations. You've also been involved within your fraternity. Could you talk about the leadership positions that you've held in the fraternity?
Yeah, my first semester, I was associate member, and after I went through the initiation ceremony, we had elections right around the corner, and I was nominated for treasurer. Two guys who were on that list before me, they were elected to other different positions, so I was left running against my own self. And what I didn't realize at the time was how tough the position was. It was, it involved me having, as a freshman, going up to older members and telling them, hey, you need to pay your dues, taking them to collections, taking them to the executive committee, which I also sat on due to the position, also holding them and going over judicial cases and disciplining my own brothers who are older than me. That was the first year. The second year, I was the social chair. And this was a long route of being put in the most hated positions. I was the social chair. I had to plan the socials with all the other sororities around campus, and that was a lot, trying to plan an event for your fraternity while also working with another group on campus. And having to plan the formal event, which is the biggest dance or the biggest event, and going up against seniors who want their last formal to be the best. I hated that position, by the way. And then the last position that I held that I loved the most, and by this time, at this point, I didn't care if my brothers hated me or talked ill of me, was the ritualist position, or the master of ceremonies per se. It dealt a lot with going into the teachings of our ritual. And so a little bit back, the position in itself is described as being the keeper of the ritual and our teachings and our symbols, which meant that I had to make sure that all of our brothers were living out our values, living out the ritual every single day, and that they respected those teachings. I had to put the ceremonies together. From that position, I gained a whole different perspective on my fraternity and how to live as a gentleman. And I love that position, mostly because I love ceremonies and whatnot, but because it took how I was going to live my life to a whole different height. And to this day, I am thankful enough that I've been able to hold so many positions within my fraternity, despite having the negative opinion of being the toughest guy in the fraternity, which comes with most of the guys hating me. But from there, I gained respect from them because I wasn't afraid to make the tough calls and make tough decisions. Going
off of respect from your fellow brothers, you were also the homecoming candidate for
Yeah,
High Alpha this past fall. Could you talk about how you got nominated for that position?
Yeah, I think it was right after I got elected, and they were thinking strategically and politically as well. They said, well, we have the student body president, might as well use him, get some more attention away. I was like, I have a communication team at my disposal. So it just made sense for them to nominate me. And I ended up as the only person to get it too in the fraternity. I went unchallenged, and I was honored by my brothers to have that. I had no idea that I would be involved in homecoming my senior year. Had no plans on it, but it was the best, one of the most fun experiences in my life.
Could you tell me about the Homecoming Royalty Corps experience? Because I know they have a lot of events throughout the week, including, isn't it a talent show or something?
Yeah.
I saw that you and your other candidate for Queen had to do like a Dirty Dancing kind of outfit.
Yeah,
we the whole experience.
Since it was a blast from the past, my whole senior year, I wanted to take as many risks and be as bold as possible. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna strip down to my underwear and slide out on stage and live to tell the tale to my grandmother when she finds out about it. So that was, I would say I was nervous and my heart was beating fast before I went out on stage.
And then how will you say that the experience of being in a fraternity, particularly Lambda Chi Alpha, will help you in the future? Like, what will you take away from the experience of being in a fraternity?
I would take away knowing how to work with others, a lot of conflict management skills, what values I know that I am going to be unwavering in, and to take that in my pursuit of my own dreams in life and helping others as well, being a mentor to the younger guys who come up, and to make sure that I leave behind a legacy that others will value and want to uphold as well.
Before we close the interview, is there anything that we haven't asked you today that you would like people to know about your life, career, or experiences here at Ball State?
I would say one lesson that I would love to leave behind for somebody else to take to heart is to not be afraid, basically, of this new opportunity in life, in college, or for the rest of your life. Because I've come to find out that you're not in life to discover who you are. You are born to create whoever you want to be. Your life, your destiny, your fate, whatever it is you want to call it, it is all in your hands. It's not out there predetermined. It's whatever you want to make of it. And if it's anything that anybody can take from my life, is that I've tried to create my own experience, create my own name, and be whoever I wanted to be in that moment and want to be later in life. It's just been a knack for me to just build and create. And I want others to know that they have it in their hands and their own powers and ability to do the same.
Well, then, on behalf of the Ball State University African American Alumni Oral History Project, I'd like to thank you for your participation today.
Thank you.
I can't say participation. It's sad.